As you guys can see, it is absolutely beautiful out today. So I knew that I wanted to do a video, and I was like, what kind of video do I want to do today? Well, there's something in particular that I've been really studying lately, and it's this idea of understanding neurology, of understanding how our brain works and how our brain is wired from past experiences. So, what I want to talk about today is this idea of how to rewire our brain and the tools that we can use towards having a more abundant mindset versus having a stagnant mindset. So, let's get into it. Now, understanding first off is this idea that we need to project ourselves, we need to understand more about how we can become the best version of ourselves. Well, the easiest way to do this is to understand that having a progressive mindset is one of the most powerful things we can do towards getting that result that we want in life. Now, progression may be exponential. You may just get a little bit better every day. But the more that you do it, the more that you are becoming successful because you are exponentially getting better. Now, this idea then is using this idea of progressive mindset and then applying it to the idea of success. Now, when we talk about neurology and understanding how neurons work in the brain, it's understanding it in a very simplistic way. I'm going to explain it in the most simple way that I can because I want to shoot this idea to you and I really want to just hammer it in, hardwire it into your brain so that it's easier to understand. Now, the idea behind neurons is first understanding what are neurons. Neurons are the transmitting nerve signals inside the brain. I think of it more along the lines of thoughts. So when you have thoughts that connect to each other, neurons will connect to each other, and the more consistently you think those thoughts or those neurons, the more you hardwire it into your brain. So let me give you an example of something that I used to associate pleasure with. So the idea of food, the idea of pleasure, connected to the idea of junk food. 3 or 4 years ago, I used to eat more junk food. I would get fast food. It was something that I associated a lot of pleasure with. So the idea is that the more consistently I thought those thoughts, the more I reinforced them, the more that I hardwired my brain towards when I was hungry, I would think about junk food because those neurons were connecting. And in neuroscience, neurons that fire together wire together. So the idea is that the more consistently I thought these thoughts, the more that they began to wire to more, it was more habitual and it was something that was on autopilot. Now, once I began doing my own research and I began understanding how beneficial it is to eat green drinks, to do these things that are more holistic or that are more balancing of the body, then what I did was I began to disconnect those thoughts with the idea of food and connect it to the idea of green foods or having lighter diet or having more live foods with live enzymes. So the idea then is I begin to associate pleasure with those instead of what it was connected to before. And what happened was I then began to hardwire myself towards when I thought about what I wanted to eat, it became very natural for me to think about foods that were live enzymes or foods that were a lot healthier for the body. Now, this is something that habitually had to be done because the more that you fire and you repetitively think those thoughts, the more it begins to wire together. And a lot of what we already have hardwired is either on autopilot, which means a lot of times we're not even aware of it, but also it's been so habitually hardwired that it takes a little bit of time to get it to another state. So what I'm going to be talking about today are the 3 tools that I use in my own life and 3 tools that I've read from a book called You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza. Now, this is an amazing book. It's a book that I read maybe 4 or 5 months ago, but it really hones in on this idea that we can change and become the perfect version of ourselves through understanding how our brain works. Now, the first tool that I want to give you is this idea of expanding our comfort zone. Now, what he explains in this book is that 60,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day is what we think. That of those 60 to 70,000 thoughts, 90% of them are repeated from the day before, meaning that we are triggering the same emotions, we're triggering the same type of experiences, and we're perpetuating the same level of neurology over and over and over again. Now, the more that we do this, the more that we are remaining stagnant because we are creating the same experiences. Now, what he says is that if you immerse yourself in a new environment, you're immediately stimulating yourself in a new way because what you're doing is you are looking around and your sense perceptions are completely immersed in a new environment. So your brain is turning on and you're paying attention because you're no longer on autopilot. So the idea is to get around people that you haven't been around before, to go to places that you haven't been, and the more that you do this, the more that you're expanding out of your comfort zone, the more action you take on doing things that you haven't done before, the more you are hardwiring yourself for new experiences and becoming more of somebody that you prefer to be, because now you're becoming more flexible, you're becoming more of somebody that takes risks maybe, or it could be a multitude of different things. But this idea is that expanding our comfort zone is the first tool towards understanding that we can change our life by changing our environment, the people we're speaking to, and the experiences that we're having. Now, the second tool is something that I've used in my own life, and it's this idea of triggering. So anytime that I would think about junk food in the past, when I was going through this process, I would then set myself up a trigger where immediately when I would think of the idea of junk food, what I would do was I would become aware that that's what I'm thinking of, so it's about observing it, and then I would choose the thoughts that I prefer to have. So instead of food being junk and pleasurable, I would think of food and pleasure as the idea of green foods, of live foods, of foods that actually have lots of vital enzymes and energy. Triggering is also a powerful tool because you become more aware of the thoughts that you're having versus responsive and reactive to whatever is going on around you. Now, the third concept is something that I learned from Mark Cuban, actually. I was reading one of his interviews, and I came upon the fact that from a young age, what he would do was he would read biographies of people who've already obtained the level of success that he wanted, and how he thought that was one of the things that shaped him on who he is today. Now, I've done other research and other books and heard a lot of people that say that the best way to get success is to entrain yourself with those people that are already thinking and have already obtained the level of success that you want. So what the third tool that I recommend doing is reading books, reading biographies of these people that have attained the success that you want, the people that are your role models, and that the more that you do this, the more you begin to entrain the neurological structure of your brain towards being more like them. And the more that you become like them, the more that you think like them. And the more that you think like them, the more likely you are to get those results. Now understand, you can still be yourself, but what you are doing is understanding things from a more powerful point of view. You are understanding that the more that you entrain yourself with the people that are thinking in the same lines of where you want to be, the more that you're going to become that. And the more that you become that, the more your reality begins to shift to where you want it to go. Let's go over the three tools. The three tools are expanding your comfort zone, becoming aware that 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day that you think are 90% recycled from the day before, and choosing to put yourself in a new environment. The second one being using a trigger towards becoming aware of what you're thinking, towards then putting it to where you want to actually be thinking. And then the third one of putting and immersing yourself in the neurology of people who have already obtained the level of success that you want. So I hope these tools have helped you today. I hope that at some level you're able to either understand how neuroscience works in regards to the rewiring of our brains, and then how we can use this to benefit our life, to become the more perfect version of who we want to be. So until next week, hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to like or subscribe below. You guys have a great day.